Good morning, Lawrence.
Hello again, Jenny.
Here we are again.
Yeah, we're back.
Another week has flown by.
I know, it doesn't take long, does it?
Does it not?
No.
I bet you were really looking forward to sitting in front of me again today.
Well, when you said to come back, I thought, well, it can't have been that bad last time. So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and the sun's shining. I know we're in our studio.
Yeah,
Call it studio,
there's no sun
we?
shining in here, but
There's
we
no-
know it's there.
We know it's there, yes. Adam's pulled the blinds down so it doesn't reflect on our beautiful faces.
Well, that's the nicest thing anyone's said, and it's not even lunchtime.
It's not even lunchtime. So welcome to the ISO for Growth podcast. Really appreciate your time because I know how busy as a consultant you've got many clients that you're working with, and so yes, I do appreciate you coming to sit in front of me.
If any of our clients listen to this, at least they know a little bit more about what we do and why we do it. So there's the practical side to this. It's always making people aware and educating, so it's all good.
It's all good. So for our listeners who are joining us on this first occasion, the last time we sat together, we looked at ISO 9001 and we looked at clauses 4 and 5, which were the context of the organisation and also leadership.
Yeah.
And so if anyone wants to just go back and recap on those before this one.
It'll be helpful, and it helps to have that awareness of the progression of the clauses. Like you say, we had that awareness, the context, and then we've got that leadership. So we imagine in our perfect system, perfectly done there, perfectly done there. Obviously, we're going to look at the next few stages through the process.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to dive right in now and get on to clauses 6 and 7. So clause 6 is about risks and opportunities. So in a small business, typically a business owner will know the risks. Every day as a business owner myself, I know the risks that I face every single day, every week, every month, every year, and a lot of that can be stored in our heads. When we're setting up a business, for example, we just want to hit the ground running and get on. And yes, we know those risks are there, but we kind of manage them in our heads. So for those who are not sure what I'm referring to in terms of risk, can you explain what a risk is and the importance of really getting that risk, out of our little heads, or my little head I'll refer to?
No. And you know what? It is overwhelming when you talk about risk, particularly if you look on Google and you type in risk. There might be risk-based thinking for huge organizations, and people with a small business may think, well, where do I fit into that? Do I need to have really complex risk assessments for every eventuality under the sun? And depending on who you ask, they might say, yes, you do. And others will say, no. Very bewildering. So I'm going to read my definition of a risk.
Love it.
A risk is anything that could stop you delivering quality products or services. Yeah. It's a potential problem that you can see coming. Now, as I think we kept saying in our last chat, every business is different. So we might have 10 small businesses, but every one of them will have different risks. But if we were talking quite generic about the sorts of risks that people face, it might be problems with suppliers. Particularly if you're in a manufacturing, you've got suppliers, you need to make sure they're right. It could be to do with your machinery. It could be more IT-based if you're in an office-based service industry. Yeah. There's just such a variety of risks.
There are.
But I think a nice way to view it is maybe like potholes in a road. So potholes can come in all shapes and sizes. Some are massive. Some of them will wreck your car if you run through them. Some of them are tiny. It might just be a little bump. Yeah. And it's up to us as business owners and as consultants working with businesses to just try and identify which are the big ones.
Yes, and relevant to that.
And relevant,
yes.
Exactly. Because we can't necessarily document every risk under some. We'd have risks of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of things. And like we went back to our definition, it's things that will stop us delivering a quality product or service. So it kind of narrows our perspective down, and we say, right, these are the risks that matter to those things. Yeah. And that's easier said than done, because sometimes we think of the business perspective. Business owners have lots of worries about all sorts of things. And it's kind of the idea that if everything's relevant, nothing is. If we list every risk under the sun, then how do you focus on the important
ones? That's right, yes.
So it's kind of helping businesses to understand that when we're talking about risks, with strategic risks, start high level, look down and say, what's the big picture? What are the big things? Maybe the things that keep you up at night as a business owner? What are they? And those conversations, again, are interesting for us because you see what matters to different businesses.
Absolutely.
And it's really important that business owners reflect that in what they document as their own risks.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And the importance of why we encourage the documentation of those risks is, one, you can share it with your respective teams so that they understand and they can support you managing those risks as well.
That's it. Yeah. And it's good to have a conceptual awareness and say, well, yeah, there's that risk and that risk. But when you write them down, when you document them, as you said, you can share them with your team. And it also just kind of crystallizes in people's heads. Right. So these were the risks 12 months ago. Are they still the risk now? And will they still be the same risk in 12 months' time? So just that exercise of writing, like when we do diaries and journals, it really helps us to think about it properly. And not only that, saying, well, we've got a risk and then going back to what we were doing before. When you document the risk, it's the first stage of going, okay, we're now planning to go further with this. How are we going to manage that risk? What are we going to do about it? How can we control it, mitigate it? And of course, again, depending on the size of the business and the type, there's lots of ways you can do that. ISO doesn't say you must do it in exactly this way. So there may be one system that works perfectly for one business and not another. Somebody might have a very complex and detailed set of risk assessments. Somebody else may be a little bit more simplistic.
Yeah.
Doesn't downplay either. It's just working out which is appropriate for which.
That's very true. No, that's very true. And I do like the idea of actually having it documented because it is a bit of a journey that you're on. With your risk. So yes, in day one, you might identify, I don't know, a key supplier, as you mentioned, who's, you've got one key supplier to deliver that one product that you need or service. And that would be a high risk because you're reliant on that one supplier. And if you don't have those goods, then you can't deliver your service.
Yeah.
And then as you go on your journey of running your business, you identify, there's another supplier out there that actually can do it. So that risk then becomes, it's still a risk because you've got now just two, but the risk isn't as great as what it would be.
Yeah. And the phrase that comes up in ISO, because all the standards, is risk-based thinking. And that's maybe something that's good to view as a principle, as opposed to a set of detailed, strict, you must do it this way.
Yeah.
We all kind of have a bit of a sweat when we look at a risk assessment table and there's numbers all over it and there's pre and post risk and mitigation. It can become like that. But if we take it in a risk-based thinking perspective, which is what ISO expects, it's looking at the relevant risk to your business. And thereby it helps us to just hone in on the ones that really matter.
Really matter, yeah. And that's key, isn't it? That the really matter and the relevant to your industry.
Definitely. That'd be my short summary and in a nutshell, talking about what risks are. Yeah.
I like that. So the other element of clause 6, we talk about risk and then there are opportunities. So the next element, like I said, is to outline the business opportunities. What do we mean and how do we support our clients to address this particular area?
Yeah. So in a perfect world, and again, this is why documenting it's good, and it helps maybe to visualize and crystallize it. We've got a set of risks, and we don't just shrug our shoulders and go, "Well, can't do anything, moving on." We want to try and look at those risks, and if possible, exploit the risk into something that can turn into an opportunity. So if we've got stormy skies and you can see all these dark clouds and there's a bit of blue sky, don't just keep flying towards the clouds. Turn the plane and start going towards the blue sky. Right? That's kind of the idea. So opportunities could maybe translate into all sorts of things depending on what the identified risk is. Sometimes it could be a new avenue of business, maybe a new market that's opened up because we say, well, the current market is quite limited, but hold on, if we went over here, that could be really good for us. So there's never ending thing. Technology is another one that's very, very popular with businesses where they say, well, if we were to look into this type of thing, it would mitigate that risk and it would improve the business. So there's so many things and it's so wide. And yet that is the basic thing. We're trying to turn that risk into something positive and exploit it into something that works.
Yes, you're quite right there. And I often look at opportunities as well as it'd be nice to have. So it's not something that I'm going to strive for this moment in time. It's just that thought, that sort of, I wonder if.
Yeah, it's a wish list ultimately.
Yes, a wish list,
because we've all done that. We've gone on Amazon, we've done our shopping and we go, I'd like that. or click, add to the basket, and you don't obviously, but well, hopefully you don't buy everything. I'm hoping you've got a bit of self-control, but you will go through that list at the end and you say, okay, well, I can make that work and I can probably afford that. And I can, similar with opportunities, we'd love to be able to do everything, and it's good to be ambitious. We don't want to sort of just say, oh, that's the bare minimum, I'll just do that. Try and set ambitious targets, but they've got to work for the business. They've got to be affordable. They've got to be achievable. So make sure those opportunities work for you. And then it's, like you say, working towards them in the best interest of the business. Say, yeah, we actually can make that work. We could take that further. And then saying, maybe not that one. Maybe that's not for us. And then you can put it to the side. But again, that process of writing them down just helps you to manage them, track them, and make sure they come to fruition.
Yes, absolutely. I completely agree with you. Yeah, completely agree. So the next exciting area I always think is actually setting quality objectives. Lots of businesses have them and a lot don't have them. Sometimes they'll think, oh, yes, I'll set an objective, but it's not actually meeting, because we're talking about ISO 9001, so it's a quality management system.
Yeah.
And, I have over the years seen some business owners, oh, yes, I've got this objective to, I don't know, grow by 10% and, or the basic around very financial objectives, and they forget about the quality aspect. So, how do we, again, help our clients align their objectives in a smart way, so we can remind our listeners what SMART means, because I think that's really important.
We love an acronym, don't we?
Well, yeah.
SMART. So obviously you're right. Smart. Be smart about it. It's think smarter. Don't work. Work smarter, not harder. Yeah. I got that right?
I hope so.
I
don't know.
No, I have. It is. Work smarter, not harder. You don't want to just be setting objectives that really aren't working for your business, and it's all about doing that. So I'm going to take my thing from last time, getting you a few quotes. So I found one here: if you can't measure it, you can't improve it.
Oh, love that.
So let's take that thought. So objectives that don't have any measurable parts to them, very difficult to track. So your example of, let's just be 10% better. Let's get 10% more. Well, 10% better in what? So money's obviously the easy one that people go for, but how are you going to measure that? If you're going to grow by 10%, grow in what? Have you got some sort of metric that marries up with that? So your comment about SMART objectives. So we know that's an acronym, and whilst it's not ISO mandated, it is something that's very useful. So that SMART acronym is to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
Absolutely.
And so when you set objectives, when you have that acronym, that criteria in your head, it helps to go, okay, is this objective meeting those things? So is it specific enough? Is it a bit vague and wishy-washy like you're describing? If it is, it's not really working. It's quite a weak objective, we'd say. And we want our objectives to be stronger. Again, the measurable part, if we can't put some sort of measurement on it and say, how are you going to track that, then it's not great. Achievable. Again, we talked about ambition earlier. So it's great to be ambitious, but if it's shooting for the stars, great, but are you going to hit it? Make sure you're going to hit it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Relevant. We're talking about a quality management system here. So there's all sorts of objectives that businesses can set. Obviously, as more management systems come in, there could be information security or environmental issues. All very important. Not the idea of the objectives to downplay it, but they've got to be relevant to the management system. So what's going to affect the quality? What affects the things that we do for our clients? And then the last one about being time bound. Great set objectives that you'll set in 30 years' time. And if that is a relevant one, then great. But generally, you probably want to speed it up a bit. So will it be a 6-month time frame, a year, 2 years, 5 years? But make it specific so that you can then start tracking your progress and going, I've set that deadline, I'm going to work towards it. And that's really important. They all are so simple, but when we sit down to do it, it feels a bit overwhelming. And we as consultants sometimes ask the client, so what objectives do you have? And obviously, this is part of going back to our clause 5 on the policy. The policy asks us to set objectives, so it's all linked. But it can be very hard for a client to go, oh, actually, I'm not sure. So it's really good to again write them down so that they're documented, they can be shared, they're crystallized, and they're focused in what the business is doing.
Absolutely. And I mean, bottom line is your objective is about driving your business forward. So it's not just, there shouldn't be fluffy objectives just for the sake of, I want to tick that box. They've got to have some meaning behind them. And like you keep quite rightly say, relevant to your business.
And for them to be relevant doesn't mean they have to be complicated.
No, they don't.
So a simple objective is really what we want. And it's what all auditors want. It's what everybody wants. People in your organization want simple objectives so that they can go, I know what I'm working towards. If they're really complex and maybe you've got 50 objectives, is everybody going to remember that? Is that going to? No, it's not. So make sure that they're simple, clear and concise and that everybody can get on board with them, because that's what leadership, again, who's setting the objectives want to do. They want everybody to say, right, here's what we're working to. And the objectives don't have to be the same, do they? They can change. As we said with the risk change, the objectives will change. The direction of the business alters. Let's make sure the objectives keep pace and move with them.
I love that. Because that is really important as well, because, we have seen over the years that some clients will set objectives and then they diversify a little bit and those objectives don't become relevant anymore. And so, change them. And then there's also situations, I should say, whereby, an objective has been set and they've put a particular time frame in it and they've come to that time frame and they've not hit it. Yeah. And so it's just to really understand, well, how relevant was it in the first place? Well, how has the business changed for that to have not met the deadline, I should say, not the requirements, but certainly the deadline. And also have it set an objective. And because you've changed, actually, I want to remove it because it serves no purpose anymore to us. So I think once we've written it, doesn't mean to say it's set in stone. It's there to guide the business. But actually, as you evolve, you can change it.
That's it. And, it's putting a square peg in a round hole eventually, potentially. And objectives that just sit there and gather dust, it's not helping anybody.
Have no meaning.
And then, arguing over an objective that isn't relevant, well, just change it.
Just change
Make it work for you.
Yeah.
Or it might be a case of changing the metric. We said we wanted to be 80% better. Well, is that realistic? Why don't you rein that in and make it? And then you'll find, that objective is more achievable now.
Absolutely.
So it's always having that view of it. And the importance of documenting it can also become a risk where, great, I've written it down, I'll put that in the drawer and I'll think about that in a year's time. And that's why our objectives have to be communicated, make people aware of them so that everybody works towards it. So that when you come to the next time to review it, however often that might be, you go, right, yeah, okay, here's what we've been doing to work towards it. Nothing worse than businesses that kind of panic and they go, oh, we've not done anything with this, which indicates something's not going right here. So it's our job as consultants to help businesses not only set the objective, but make sure they're working towards it and achieving it as well.
And it's interesting that you've just mentioned about something not working quite. Somebody's created the objective, it sits in a drawer, theoretical drawer, and then they panic when the auditor's coming back out to audit them. But actually, how the objective links to the leadership element, because then you go back to leadership and go, well, what's the leader been doing all year in terms of supporting the business to meet those objectives? So there's a disconnect there already.
Absolutely.
Isn't there?
And then, again, that's why the standard asks that awareness of objectives. It requires businesses to communicate that to everybody who's got an interest in the business. So if you're not communicating the objectives and then a year comes by, we've not achieved it. Did you tell anybody? Or was it locked in your drawer? Yeah. So again, it's a big red flag if that's what businesses are doing. The standard doesn't allow it because it's a broken system then. So it's really important to have that remembrance that objectives aren't just written down and locked away. They're shared and the organisation and benefits from that.
Absolutely. No, I love that. So just to recap for our listeners, we've just covered the risks and the opportunities. We're looking at the risks to the business, looking at it from a high level perspective. And then we're looking at the opportunities. So they're about, I'd like to have one day. I'd like to go down that path one day. I'd like to acquire one day ideas. And then the quality objectives. Quality because we're talking about ISO 9001. But if you were to look at other standards such as the information security, then obviously you would look at information security objectives and so on and so on.
And we've said, the clause titles, this is about planning. So our context and leadership have informed our planning because we go, well, we know what our business does. We're aware of internal, external issues. We've done all that. if you then disconnect that from the planning and say, right, let's start again, something's not working. You want your risks and your objectives and your opportunities to be informed by all that hard work you've done. If it's a pestle or a SWOT, all that awareness you've got of what's happening, feed it into this now. And then at this point, we're hoping that you've got some really solid foundations. You know what you're doing. The business knows what they're doing. Everybody's on board. And that's why it's such an important clause. Although it's relatively small in terms of what the standard asks, if you miss this part out, it's going to mean that the rest of the system starts to stumble and fall over.
It does, yeah. There's a complete disconnect because they all link to each other when you really think about it.
That's it. So that's why, like you say, high level, it's important.
High level. So we're going to move on, Lawrence, to clause 7, all about support. I'm going to start with resources. So what typically is ISO 9001 looking for and why when it talks about resource? What's it referring to?
So again, we'll start with our things. So we've got our planning, we're moving on to support. How are you going to bring your dreams, your wish list, your objectives? How are you going to put that all in place? If you haven't got the resources to do it, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think, again, going back to our illustrations of baking a cake last time, weren't we?
Yes.
So let's go back to that. I've got this lovely recipe. Fantastic. You got the ingredients. Oh, I forgot to buy. Oh, I forgot the butter. Oh, I can't. If you don't have the ingredients, you're not going to bake a cake.
And the tools.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you need to have all those components. Like you say, the ingredients, the tools. If you remember to pay your gas bill, if there's no oven, you're not going to be baking a cake.
Yeah, that's true.
All of those things come together so that you can make that thing. So that's what our resourcing clause is about. Have you got the resources in place to support your system? So there's sub clauses here. The key ones are about people, infrastructure, the environment, monitoring and measurement tools, information and knowledge. So just to run through them and give everybody an awareness of what's being asked for here, we're talking about people. Obviously, it's self-explanatory. People are what makes a business work. You can have plenty of people or not enough people, and even having enough people isn't quite enough because they need to have knowledge, which we'll come to shortly. But having the right people in place that can manage all the identified aspects of your system, whether that be in a factory, whether it be in an office, have you got enough people? So there's that one. Infrastructure, the buildings you work from. Now, increasingly these days, people work remotely, which is good because, it maybe lowers the amount of infrastructure they need. However, most businesses have some form of infrastructure.
Yeah.
It could be the offices they're working from.
Yeah.
It could be the factory, their warehousing. All of those things come into it. On top of that, what about transport companies with vehicles? What about all of the things that make up the content of those buildings? Do they need maintenance? Do they need to be, checked? Do you need to get third parties into it? Inevitably you do. but that's what our standards do here. We need to make sure we're aware of what we've got and it's working properly and it's documented down that, okay, here's this and this. Yeah. It helps businesses to then manage it.
And I was going to just to add to that, which is quite right, everything that you're saying there. And the reason why that's so important is because if you don't have the infrastructure in place, if you don't have the resources in place, then how can you deliver your service?
Exactly.
Or your products that you're creating for your customers?
Yeah. And it's straightforward. You think, well, I've got people and I've got stuff in place. It's always worked for me. And that might be the case, but will it be the same next year?
Yes. As you're growing.
Exactly. And so whilst it maybe at first feels a bit, I've got to do that. I've got to put all that down. Oh, somebody's going to come and check and audit that. But the idea behind it is that every year you can review that and you can say, have we got enough here? Yeah. Like you say, the business has grown. This isn't enough. We need more. Or maybe, unfortunately, the business shrinks and you've got loads of stuff and you look and you think, well, actually, we've got far too much here. Not working for us anymore. So it's just helping a business to work with what's happening, not what they think's happening. So it's really it's an important part of it. So again, people, infrastructure, the environment. When we say environment, not just general environment, we mean the environment of the buildings, the work, the atmosphere. So making sure that it's clean, light, safe. I'm pretty hopeful that there's not many businesses that are working out of places that aren't in the right environment, but that's what we're asking for there.
Yeah.
Monitoring and measurement tools is another one, which certain industries and businesses will come across this heavily because they'll talk about calibration.
Yes.
So if your business monitors and measures anything, whether that be weighing things, whether that be part of your manufacturing processes, whether it be machines that they've got to be calibrated and work properly, because a quality management system is about the end product.
Yes.
If along that process things aren't being measured properly, they're askew, of course it's going to affect what comes out the other end, either through deliberate dishonesty or just unplanned things that shouldn't be happening. So it's really important and vital that businesses make sure things are calibrated, and that's just a must. And then you come to the last part, which is about information and knowledge. And that's really vital, because whilst you can have the right people, if they can't have access to the knowledge they need to do their job, what good is it? Or maybe you've got one person who sits on all that knowledge and they keep it all to themselves. Is that really helping your business? It's not. So how do you make sure that one person, maybe with all the technical knowledge, distributes that to the right people? And do those people have it available? It's great. We've got a huge folder full of all this information, but it's locked away. No one can get it. Who's that helping? So it's really helping a business to go, have you made sure that all of those bits of knowledge that are needed for your business are shared with the right people? And it's difficult because businesses, obviously, confidentiality, there might be the secret sauce that makes their business work. I don't want to share that. So there's got to be a level of reasonableness, but ultimately, how do you make sure that the right people have the right information?
Yes. It's really looking at, in summary, I guess, it's looking at the potential impact, whatever you're doing, your environment that you're working in, the tools that you're using can impact on the client or your customers, positively or negatively. And ideally, we want positive outcomes, not negative ones.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so we're going to move on to communication. And communication is really about internal and external communication. So communication is often when a business can really fail because they're not sharing. We've just touched on not sharing the objectives, not sharing, risk. Yes, I appreciate some businesses won't share all their risks. But certainly they need to let their teams, or they should, I should say, let their teams know about risks that are relevant to them. So there'll be different tiers in a business, I guess. So, the more senior management team will have more of an idea of more sensitive risks, maybe, that they don't want to share and worry the shop floor staff.
Of course.
But there'll be some risks that the shop floor frontline workers should be aware of. So communication. So, clause 7.4 asks the what, when, whom and how and who we should communicate to. Seems quite straightforward when I break it down like that. But why is communication so important, both internally and externally?
Yeah, and you've made the point there about internal, external communication. So we can communicate generally. We all do it, don't we? But the standard wants us to just really think clearly about this, because we might all know internally how we work. But do our customers know how we work? Probably not. So we need to make sure we've got understanding of the way we work, and also how do we communicate with our customers? It's just really being explicit about it, because the what, whys, when, all of that information, you've got to be clear so that you don't have things going wrong. You could be saying too much or too little. Things are ambiguous and vague. Do all of your employees understand what they can say and what they can't? Do they have the authority to speak on certain things or not? We can sometimes just assume that everybody knows, particularly in a smaller business. Oh, yeah, everybody knows what they're doing. Particularly as leadership kind of goes, yeah, of course everybody knows. But there could be somebody sat in the corner going, I don't really want to say anything. So it's up to leadership to make sure they sit down and go, are people actually aware? Are we communicating with them? And then making sure that the actual communication that occurs is clear. So some of the things I wrote down, why it's crucial: stop duplication of effort. That's a really big one. You've got one person sat there doing the one thing and the other person's doing that. If they've only just communicated it, would have been, straightened out. Prevents mistakes. Of course, mistakes are going to happen if things aren't being communicated properly, if the right channels aren't in place to do that. So that's important. Keeps customers informed, like we say, making sure externally they know what's happening. Makes everybody aligned. supports growth and consistency, builds trust. And I thought that last one was interesting with building trust, because that is, as a business, what we want, not only for our employees, but for our clients. We want them to trust us. So if we're not communicating, again, things become quite opaque, vague. They say, well, I assume they're doing what they need to.
Yes.
And that's what we really want to avoid. We want to make sure that everybody in that journey is properly informed. So that communication clause, again, it doesn't say too much in the standard, but the idea behind it, the principle behind it, again, is about clarity. We don't want ambiguity. And it's really important that businesses grasp that.
Absolutely. And not just make the assumption, like you quite rightly say, that our clients or our customers will understand what we're doing, and internally our teams will know what we're doing. And that really does fall when it's a small business, we're a small business, and, communication's it's just there. It's kind of fluid and everybody knows, but check, do they really know?
Yeah,
do they know?
That's it. And you think of all the hard work that's gone before this clause has come. Like you say, all that planning you've done, and then you go, I've got resources in place. We didn't discuss it about competence and awareness, that, you've trained your employees, you've made sure they've got all the right qualifications. Again, they're aware of the management system. I've got my objective. All of that's clear. And then you stop communicating. It just breaks down in an instant, doesn't it? It's such a vital part of the chain. So you've got to keep communicating internally, externally, because if one of those two things breaks down, the whole system's struggling, and that's why it's there, because it's kind of like the oxygen that is needed to breathe, isn't it? Without it, things suffocate.
All put together. I like that.
Oh, well,
I like that.
Thank you.
I like that. So just for this, the ISO for Growth podcast, put my teeth in. We're on clause 7.5, which is the final section of what we're going to discuss today. So we're onto I would call the dreaded documented information. Yeah. Everybody's like, sighs. Oh my God, what on earth do you mean? So, it's sometimes referred to as the paperwork clause. Document control, or the management of document control, can be quite a difficult area to get your head around. Yeah. Can you, what do we mean when we say document control as a starting point, and how do we help our clients understand it and manage it? Because it can be quite a nightmare, can't it?
So, the whole aim of our podcast is to make things clear and concise and simple. Yeah. So rather than spitting out loads of jargon, it's about making sure that not only have you got information there, that it's clearly identified, that it's clear. I understand that I'm using the right version. So there's lots of phrases that people will hear about access, about version controls. And really what we're trying to get is that the documents are the right ones for the right people at the right time. Again, we've used our illustration about locking stuff in a drawer and no one's got access to it. Well, that's not really working with this clause. So paperwork can be a bit dreaded. Increasingly these days, as opposed to previous years where everything was printed, document controls become far more digitalized. And I know that something we've found as a business is working with businesses to manage this in a manageable way, is to use some of the tools available. There's SharePoint, Google Drives, there's OneDrive, there's loads of these platforms. And what they do is they will put version histories on documents. So as opposed to my piece of paper that had to manually put the version 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, these systems now will automatically do it. And if we're using digital-based things without printing stuff out, uncontrolled documents, then fantastic. It works so well. It helps businesses to not spend inordinate amounts of time.
Yes.
That's the phrase, inordinate amount of times, worrying about, is this the right version? And that's where using technology really supports and helps clients with this. Again, nice quote here. It was about document control is your business's memory. Yeah. Without it, every day starts from scratch. And I thought about that, and I thought, that's really true. Because if every time you go in to look in your folder structure on your drive for your computer, it's a mess and nothing's saved right, and is that the right version? And there's 7 copies of the same document. How do you know where to start? And what are the chances that you're going to use the wrong version, which means the client has a negative outcome? It's directly impacting the deliverables of the quality that you're trying to deliver. So it's so important. And it I think depending on our mindsets, some of us can be messy, some of us are very tidy and clean. If you ask my wife at home, nothing's ever in the right place. But when it comes to document control of these systems, it's really vital to be clean and tidy. Yeah. Keep things in their places, make sure everything's clearly identified, try not to have duplications of stuff. And whilst, there is a level of technical requirement that the standard expects, the principle behind it is just that. We don't want to be tripping up over our own shoelaces. I've used the wrong one again. It's just sitting down and clearly saying, these are the documents that make up our management system. And here's all the correct versions, whether we use a traditional document register that has them manually updated, or we have it automated via some digital platform. Ultimately, it's just having it simply there. Everybody knows exactly what makes up the system. And that's perhaps something that auditors will really appreciate, whether they're a third party or it's us or the internal auditors in a business. When version control is not right, it really can get a mess quick.
It can really quickly.
So it makes it easier for everybody involved. But primarily, again, as a business, it's such a joy when you can just open a document and go, that's the right one. Off I go. You don't want to be having Groundhog Day going, I've been here, which is the right one?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you also have to think about the impact, like I think you quite rightly said, the impact that it has on the client as well. So, the quality management system really fundamentally is about meeting customer satisfaction. And so we want to make sure that everything we do in the business is actually geared up to making sure that if you do the job and I do the job, the client or the customer will get the same results because we're following the same process, in this instance, the same documentation to make sure that we deliver what we're supposed to be delivering.
Yeah, we want to work efficiently, but efficiency isn't the point of the system, like you say. So it really helps internally working, but that is absolutely the focus, like you say. It should be making sure the client gets the right information, gets the right outcomes, and that's all that really matters in this system. It's the client, the customer focus. We're coming back to that phrase from Clause 5, leadership. That customer focus is shown even as something as innocuous as a document control system. What might not seem important on the surface of it actually really is. Because similar to what we said, if we don't communicate, it falls apart. If we don't manage the document control aspect of the system right, it might work fine in the first year. Add another 5 years to that of paperwork and documents. Yeah. It doesn't take long for us to be covered in sludge and be going, I can't find anything. And we don't want to get into that situation. So it's just being on top of housekeeping, keeping things in order, making sure our versions are right and making sure there's access to things. So, yeah.
So that's the end of Clause 7.
It's another week done.
Oh my God.
There we go. Yeah. So we know that there's lots of detail sat beneath this.
There are.
But we just want everybody to realise that whilst there is detail, it's not bewildering.
It's not.
We're here to simplify things for our clients, but right. Even for listeners who might not be working with us, it's helping them to see there's a way through this. It's not just babble and jargon that's there just to fill up some paper. There is some principles behind it, some methodology that, when applied, will help a business to grow and go forward.
Excellent. Well, once again, Lawrence, thank you so much for joining the ISO for Growth podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Certainly going to invite you back because we've got some more clauses that we're going to share.
I really need to do a bad podcast and you won't ask me back.
You'll always be welcome back, whether it's a bad one, but I'm sure it won't be. But thanks, yes, Jenny. Please do come back so that we can address the remaining clauses in the ISO 9001 system. And hopefully our listeners will have got some benefits out of our nice discussion. I'm sure they will have done.
I hope so. Thanks,
but thank you and have a great day.
Cheers, you too.
Thank you.